The massive alien fleet hung in the void of space like predators circling wounded prey. Admiral Krixtar of the Zelethi Empire stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Decimator, his 4 arms crossed behind his back as he studied the tactical display. The hologram showed hundreds of sleek, blade-shaped vessels arranged in perfect formation around a single, bulky human ship. "Look at that pathetic excuse for a warship," sneered Commander Velnash, his scales rippling with amusement. "The humans call it the Tortoise. How fitting for such a slow, lumbering piece of scrap metal." The human vessel was indeed an odd sight among the elegant alien ships. Where the Zelethi vessels were sharp and streamlined, built for speed and agility, the human ship looked like a floating fortress. Its hull was thick and angular, covered in what appeared to be layers upon layers of armor plating. Weapon ports dotted its surface, but they seemed primitive compared to the plasma cannons and energy beams that adorned the alien fleet. "Their maximum speed is barely 1/3 of our slowest corvette," reported the tactical officer, his voice dripping with disdain. "They're using some kind of ancient fusion drive technology. Our scouts report it took them 3 weeks just to reach this system from their nearest base." Laughter echoed through the bridge. The Zelethi were the masters of hit-and-run tactics, their ships capable of incredible speeds that allowed them to strike and vanish before their enemies could respond. They had conquered dozens of species with this strategy, and the humans would be no different. "Open a channel to the human vessel," ordered Admiral Krixtar. He wanted to give these primitives one chance to surrender before he destroyed them. The main view screen flickered to life, revealing the bridge of the Tortoise. Captain Sarah Chun sat in her command chair, her face calm despite being surrounded by an enemy fleet. Her uniform was simple and practical, lacking the ornate decorations that the Zelethi favored. Behind her, human crew members worked at their stations with quiet efficiency. "Human vessel, this is Admiral Krixtar of the Zelethi Empire," he announced, his voice carrying the arrogance of 100 victories. "You are hopelessly outmatched. Your slow, outdated ship cannot hope to compete with our fleet. Surrender now, and we may show mercy." Captain Chun leaned forward slightly, a small smile playing at the corners of her mouth. "Admiral, I appreciate your concern for our well-being. However, I'm afraid we must decline your generous offer." The Zelethi officers exchanged amused glances. Did this human not understand the situation she was in? "You dare refuse?" Krixtar's mandibles clicked in irritation. "Look around you, human. You are surrounded by 300 of the fastest warships in the galaxy. Your single vessel moves like a dying star whale. What possible hope do you have?" "Speed isn't everything, Admiral," Chun replied calmly. "Sometimes slow and steady wins the race." The bridge erupted in laughter again. Commander Velnash stepped forward, his 6 eyes gleaming with mirth. "Did she just quote one of their primitive fables at us? About racing animals?" "The humans are known for their delusions," added another officer. "Their entire military doctrine seems based on building the thickest armor possible and hoping for the best." Admiral Krixtar raised a hand for silence. "Captain Chun, I will give you one final chance. Power down your weapons and prepare to be boarded. Otherwise, we will reduce your Tortoise to space debris." "I'm afraid I can't do that, Admiral," Chun responded. "You see, we've been monitoring your empire's expansion for quite some time. We know what you do to species that surrender. The slavery, the exploitation, the stripping of entire worlds. That's not going to happen to humanity." "Then you have chosen death," Krixtar snarled. "All ships, attack pattern Theta 7. Let's show these primitives what real warfare looks like." The Zelethi fleet burst into motion like a school of predatory fish. Ships peeled away from their positions, accelerating to tremendous speeds as they began their attack runs. The tactical display became a swirling dance of movement as vessels approached from every angle, preparing to unleash devastating barges before racing away. On the Tortoise, alarms began to sound as the crew tracked incoming threats. "Multiple attack vectors detected," reported the tactical officer. Enemy ships approaching at high velocity. Steady as she goes, Captain Chun ordered. All hands, this is the captain. Prepare for combat. Remember your training, trust in your ship, and let's show these speed demons what humans are made of. The first wave of Zealoty ships screamed in, their plasma cannons lighting up space with brilliant blue fire. The energy beams struck the tortoise's hull, expecting to punch through the primitive armor like paper. Instead, they splashed harmlessly against a shimmering barrier that appeared just before impact. What? Commander Velnash leaned forward, his scales changing color in surprise. They have shield technology? Impossible, muttered the science officer. Their power signatures showed no indication of energy shielding capabilities. Admiral Krixtar frowned. A minor surprise. Continue the attack. Their shields can't hold forever against our firepower. Wave after wave of Zealoty ships made their attack runs, pouring tremendous amounts of energy into the human vessel. The tortoise seemed to absorb it all, its shields flaring but never failing. The human ship made no attempt to maneuver or dodge, simply sitting there like its namesake, weathering the storm. Why aren't they fighting back? Wondered one of the younger officers. They're just taking it. The attacks continued for several minutes, with hundreds of ships making passes at the seemingly helpless human vessel. The Zealoty pilots began to grow frustrated, pushing their attacks closer and harder, confident in their superior speed and agility. That's when Captain Chin finally spoke again, her voice carrying over the communication channel. Admiral Krixtar, are you finished with your demonstration? The alien commander's mandibles clicked in anger. You dare mock us while cowering behind your shields? You haven't fired a single shot. We haven't needed to, Chen replied simply. You see, Admiral, we've been studying your tactics for years. Speed and hidden run attacks are impressive, but they have a fatal flaw. What are you babbling about, human? Chen's smile widened slightly. You're predictable. Your attack patterns, your escape vectors, the way your pilots favor certain approach angles. We've cataloged it all. And now, I think it's time we showed you why the tortoise doesn't need to be fast. She turned to her weapons officer. Mr. Rodriguez, please initiate Defense Protocol 7. Aye, Captain. Initiating Protocol 7. Suddenly, the tortoise came alive. Panels all across its hull slid open, revealing weapon systems that had been hidden beneath the armor. But these weren't the primitive projectile weapons the Zealoty had expected. Instead, hundreds of small turrets emerged, each one housing sophisticated tracking systems and rapid-fire pulse lasers. What are those? Demanded Admiral Krixtar. He got his answer a moment later as the human ship opened fire. The pulse lasers didn't target the Zealoty ships directly. Instead, they fired in seemingly random patterns, filling space with a lethal web of energy beams. To the alien shock, their ships began flying directly into the laser fire. Evasive maneuvers, screamed several Zealoty captains, but it was too late. The human gunners weren't aiming at where the ships were, they were firing at where the ships would be. Every dodge, every evasive pattern, every escape vector had been calculated and anticipated. 3 Zealoty destroyers exploded in rapid succession, their speed turning against them as they flew directly into the predetermined kill zones. More ships tried to break away, only to find laser fire already waiting along their escape routes. They're predicting our movements. Commander Velnash's voice rose in panic. How was that possible? On the Tortoise Esperidge, Captain Chin watched the tactical display with grim satisfaction. 20 years, she said quietly. 20 years we've been watching you, studying every battle, every maneuver. Your pilots fly by instinct and training, following patterns they don't even realize they're following. But patterns can be predicted, Admiral, and what can be predicted can be defeated. The Zealoty fleet was in chaos. Ships collided with each other, trying to avoid the pulse laser fire. Some attempted to slow down, only to become easy targets for the Tortoise's heavier weapons, massive railguns that had also emerged from hidden ports. The projectiles they fired were simple chunks of metal, but accelerated to significant fractions of light speed, They punched through Zealothi shields and armor like they weren't even there. Full retreat. Admiral Krixtar finally ordered, his voice cracking with disbelief. All ships, emergency jump protocols. But even that had been anticipated. As the Zealothi ships began charging their jump drives, the Tortoise deployed another surprise. Small pods launched from its hull, each one containing powerful electromagnetic pulse generators. They detonated among the fleeing alien ships, sending out waves of interference that scrambled jump calculations. Several Zealothi vessels attempted to jump anyway. 2 of them succeeded, vanishing into hyperspace. 3 others weren't so lucky. Their scrambled jump drives tore their ships apart in spectacular explosions of twisted space-time. In less than 10 minutes, the mighty Zealothi fleet had been reduced by a third. The survivors hung in space, their engines damaged, or their crews too terrified to move. The predators had become prey, and they didn't understand how it had happened. Captain Shin opened a channel to the Zealothi flagship. Admiral Krixtar appeared on the screen, his previous arrogance replaced by shock and fear. "Ow," he whispered. "You're just humans. Slow, primitive humans." "Slow, yes," Shin acknowledged, "but not primitive. You see, Admiral, we learned something from an old Earth story. The tortoise won the race not because it was fast, but because it was persistent. It kept moving forward, step by step, while the hare ran itself ragged." She leaned back in her chair. "Your empire expanded too fast, conquered too greedily. You never took the time to truly understand your enemies. We've spent decades preparing for this moment, analyzing every weakness, every blind spot in your tactics. Speed means nothing if your enemy knows exactly where you're going to be." The tortoise continued its steady advance toward the Zealothi flagship, its weapons tracking the surrounding vessels with deadly precision. The aliens watched in horror as the slow human ship approached, knowing that any attempt to flee would result in their destruction. "This is just the beginning, Admiral," Chun continued. "Right now, across a dozen systems, more of our slow ships are engaging your fleets, each one equipped with the same predictive targeting systems, the same hidden weapons, the same patient crews who have studied your every move." She paused, letting the implications sink in. "You called us primitive because we couldn't match your speed. But we didn't need to match it. We just needed to understand it. And now, your greatest strength has become your greatest weakness." Admiral Krixtar's 4 arms trembled as he grasped the full scope of what was happening. The Zealothi Empire, built on the foundation of superior speed and mobility, was being systematically dismantled by an enemy that barely moved at all. "What do you want?" he asked finally, his voice barely above a whisper. "Simple," Shin replied. "You're going to order all Zealothi forces to withdraw from human space and the territories of our allies. You're going to release all slaves and return all stolen resources. And you're going to sign a treaty acknowledging humanity as a sovereign power that is not to be threatened. And if we refuse..." Chin's expression hardened. "Then you'll learn another human saying, slow and steady wins the race, but patient and thorough wins the war. We can track every ship in your fleet, predict every tactic you might employ. Your speed won't save you. Nothing will." The bridge of the Decimator fell silent as the reality of their situation became clear. They had mocked the slow human ship, laughed at its clumsy appearance and outdated technology. But now, surrounded by the wreckage of their fleet, they understood the truth. The tortoise had won. News of the Zealothi fleet's defeat spread through the galaxy like wildfire. On 1,000 worlds, species that had lived in fear of the Empire's swift strikes suddenly dared to hope. In the great gathering halls of the Galactic Council, representatives whispered in disbelief about the slow human ships that had somehow turned the tide of war. The tortoise drifted through the debris field, its crew methodically rescuing survivors from damaged Zealothi vessels. Captain Chun had insisted on following human naval tradition. Even enemies deserved rescue if they were no longer a threat. The alien survivors were brought aboard, treated for injuries, and placed in secure but comfortable quarters. In the ship's medical bay, Dr. James Patterson worked alongside his team to treat injured Zealoty crew members. Many of the aliens were initially terrified, expecting torture or experimentation. Instead, they found compassionate care and professional medical treatment. "I don't understand," muttered Subcommander Hextau, wincing as Patterson carefully set his broken arm. The Zealoty officer had been pulled from a destroyed corvette, half dead from exposure to vacuum. "Why waste resources healing enemies?" "Because that's what separates us from barbarians," Patterson replied, applying a bone regenerator to the injury. "War might be necessary sometimes, but cruelty never is. You'll be treated as a prisoner of war under the Geneva Conventions, an old Earth treaty about the humane treatment of captives." Hextal's 6 eyes blinked in confusion. "But we would have enslaved your people. We've done it to dozens of other species. And that's exactly why we had to stop you," the doctor said simply. "But just because you chose to be monsters doesn't mean we have to become monsters to defeat you." Meanwhile, on the bridge, Captain Chun was in communication with Earth Command. The holographic projection of Admiral Rebecca Thompson flickered slightly due to the vast distance between them. "Outstanding work, Captain," Thompson said, her weathered face showing rare satisfaction. The steadfast and persistent report similar successes in their sectors. "The Zealoty are in full retreat across all fronts." "Thank you, Admiral. But this is just the first phase. The Zealoty won't give up easily. They've built their entire identity around being the fastest, most agile force in the galaxy. Being defeated by slow, humans will drive them to desperate measures." Thompson nodded grimly. "Intelligence agrees with your assessment. We're detecting massive fleet movements toward the Zealoty core worlds. They're consolidating their forces, probably planning a counteroffensive." "Let them come," Chin said confidently. "The more ships they gather in one place, the more effective our predictive targeting becomes. Large fleet movements are even more predictable than individual ships." "Don't get overconfident, Sarah. The Zealoty didn't conquer a third of the galaxy by being stupid. They'll adapt, try new tactics." "Of course, Admiral. But that's why we built the Tortoise class the way we did. We're not just slow, we're adaptable. Every system has redundancies. Every weapon has multiple firing modes. We can adjust our tactics just as quickly as they can, and we have the defensive capability to survive their experiments." Their conversation was interrupted by an urgent alert from the sensor station. "Captain, we're detecting a massive hyperspace signature. Something big is coming." Chun ended her communication with Earth and turned to the tactical display. The signature was unlike anything in the Zealoty database. It was too large, too powerful to be one of their standard fleets. Space itself seemed to tear open as a colossal vessel emerged from hyperspace. It dwarfed even the Tortoise, a massive wedge of black metal bristling with weapons. But what caught everyone's attention was its design. Unlike the sleek, speed-focused Zealoty ships, this vessel was built for one thing: overwhelming firepower. "Unknown vessel, identify yourself," Chin broadcast on all frequencies. The response came in a deep, rumbling voice that seemed to shake the very hull of the Tortoise. "Human ship, I am War Master Grontak of the Krellian hegemony. We have come to witness the impossible. A Zealoty fleet defeated by a single slow vessel." The Krellians. Chin had read about them in intelligence reports. They were one of the few powers that could match the Zealoty militarily, locked in a Cold War that had lasted centuries. Neither side dared attack the other directly, knowing the resulting conflict would devastate both empires. "War Master, this is Captain Sarah Chun of the Earth ship Tortoise. Your presence here could be seen as an act of aggression by the Zealoty. Are you looking to escalate tensions?" A harsh laugh echoed over the communications channel. "The Zealoty are in no position to complain about anything, Captain. They've lost over 100 ships to your single vessel. Their myth of invincibility is shattered. But I'm not here to fight. I'm here to talk." "About what?" "About the future of this galaxy, Captain. May I come aboard?" "I promise safe conduct. The Krellians, unlike the Zealoty, honor their words." Chun considered for a moment, then nodded. You may send a single shuttle. Any signs of aggression, and we will respond accordingly. Understood. And, Captain, don't worry about aggression from us. Anyone who could defeat a Zealothy fleet with such a slow ship has earned our respect. An hour later, War Master Grontak stood in the Tortoise conference room. The Krellian was an imposing figure, 3 meters tall, covered in thick armor-like skin, with 4 powerful arms and a head that looked like a cross between a bull and a dragon. But, despite his fearsome appearance, his manner was surprisingly diplomatic. Your victory has changed everything, Grontak rumbled, settling his bulk into a specially reinforced chair. For 500 years, the galaxy has been divided between those fast enough to run from the Zealothy and those strong enough to make attacking them too costly. You've proven there's a third option. We simply use their strengths against them, Chun replied modestly. No, it's more than that. The War Master leaned forward. Your approach, patient observation, careful analysis, turning defense into offense. It's revolutionary. The Krellians have always relied on overwhelming firepower and heavy armor. The Zealothy relied on speed and agility. But you've shown that intelligence and preparation can defeat both. He paused, his 6 eyes studying the human captain. I'll be direct. The Krellian hegemony wishes to propose an alliance with humanity. Chun kept her expression neutral despite her surprise. That's a significant proposal, War Master. What would this alliance entail? Shared technology, mutual defense, trade agreements. Your predictive targeting systems, combined with our heavy weapons, would be unstoppable. Together, we could finally end the Zealothy threat and bring peace to this region of the galaxy. And what about after the Zealothy are defeated? Would the Krellians then turn on humanity? Grontak let out another booming laugh. Captain, if we wanted to conquer you, would I be sitting here talking? No, the Krellians respect strength, and you've shown strength of a kind we've never seen before. We want you as allies, not subjects. Their negotiation was interrupted by another alert. This time, it wasn't a ship arriving, but a message, a priority transmission from the Zealothy homeworld. Put it through, Chun ordered. The screen lit up with the image of an elderly Zealothy, his scales dulled with age, but his bearings still proud. Unlike Admiral Crickstar's military uniform, this alien wore elaborate robes marked with symbols of authority. I am Prime Minister Vexlor of the Zealothy Empire, the figure announced. I speak with the full authority of our government. Captain Chun, War Master Grontak, I request permission to discuss terms. The 2 commanders exchanged glances. The Zealothy Prime Minister himself was reaching out. This was unprecedented. We're listening, Chun said carefully. The Empire acknowledges its defeat. Our military doctrine, unchanged for millennia, has been proven obsolete. We cannot defeat an enemy that can predict our every move, that turns our speed against us. Vexlor paused, his 4 arms spreading in what might have been a gesture of surrender. We wish to negotiate a ceasefire and discuss the terms you mentioned to Admiral Crickstar. And why should we trust you? Grontak growled. The Zealothy have broken treaties before. Because we have no choice, Vexlor admitted. Our economy is built on expansion and conquest. Without it, we face collapse. But perhaps there's another way. Captain Chun, your treatment of our captured crews has been reported to us. You showed mercy where we would have shown none. This suggests that humanity might offer something beyond simple conquest or resistance. Chun stood, walking to the viewport to look out at the stars. The debris of the battle still floated past, a reminder of the violence that had brought them to this point. But beyond that debris lay infinite possibilities. Prime Minister, War Master, I propose something different, she said finally. Not just a ceasefire or an alliance, but a new paradigm. The Zealothy are masters of speed and logistics. The Krellians excel at defense and industrial production. Humanity brings innovation and adaptability. Separately, we've been locked in cycles of conflict. Together, we could achieve something greater. She turned back to face them. What if instead of conquering each other, we conquered the stars themselves? There are threats out there far greater than any of us. Ancient machines in dark space, entities from other dimensions, mysteries we can't even imagine. What if we face them together? The room fell silent as the three representatives considered this proposal. It was audacious, even naive. Three powers that had been enemies, suddenly working together? It seemed impossible. But then again, so did defeating a Zealoty fleet with a single slow ship. Over the following days, negotiations continued aboard the Tortoise. Other species sent representatives, drawn by the hope of a galaxy no longer dominated by the threat of Zealoty conquest. The ship designed for war became a forum for peace. The talks weren't easy. Centuries of mistrust and conflict couldn't be overcome overnight. There were heated arguments, moments when it seemed everything would fall apart. But always, the patient crew of the Tortoise brought things back on track, demonstrating the same steady persistence that had won the battle. Captain Chun found herself at the center of it all, mediating between species that had been enemies for longer than humanity had been in space. She drew on Earth's history, the formation of the United Nations after devastating wars, the European Union rising from the ashes of conflict, enemies becoming allies when they recognized a common purpose. "You're asking us to abandon everything we've known," Admiral Krixtar said during one particularly difficult session. He had been brought to the negotiations as a military advisor, his first-hand experience of defeat making him a powerful voice for change. "No, Chin Directive. I'm asking you to evolve. The Zealothy's speed is still an incredible asset. Imagine using it for exploration instead of conquest. Your ships could map uncharted regions faster than anyone else, establish trade routes, carry vital supplies to colonies in need. The same capabilities that made you feared could make you indispensable." Similar conversations happened with each species. The Krellians' defensive expertise could protect new colonies from space hazards. The technologically gifted Altarians could innovate solutions to problems that plague dozens of worlds. Each species had something unique to contribute. Slowly, painfully, an agreement took shape. Not just a peace treaty, but the foundation for something unprecedented, the Galactic Cooperative Alliance. It wouldn't be perfect, wouldn't solve all problems overnight, but it was a beginning. The signing ceremony took place in the Tortoise's largest cargo bay, converted for the occasion into an assembly hall. Representatives from 43 species gathered, some who had been enemies for centuries standing side by side. As Captain Chun watched the documents being signed, she thought about the journey that had brought them here. A slow, heavily armored ship that everyone had mocked. A patient strategy that turned weakness into strength. And, most importantly, the uniquely human belief that today's enemy could be tomorrow's ally. "You realize what you've done, don't you?" Dr. Patterson said, joining her on the observation deck above the ceremony. "Want a battle?" "No, Sada. You've changed the course of galactic history. This alliance, this cooperation, it all started because we built a slow ship and refused to be ashamed of it." Chin smiled. "The Tortoise wins again. Though I think this time we all win together." Below them, the ceremony continued. The Zealoty were already discussing patrol schedules with the Krellians. The Altarians were proposing joint research projects. Species that had never spoken except through weapons fire were making plans for a shared future. The Tortoise floated serenely in space, its hull scarred from battle but unbroken. It had been mocked for its slowness, ridiculed for its bulk. But it had endured, survived, and ultimately triumphed. Not through superior firepower or unmatched speed, but through patience, preparation, and the willingness to see enemies as potential friends. It was, Chin reflected, a very human victory. 6 months had passed since the formation of the Galactic Cooperative Alliance. The Tortoise had returned to Earth as a hero ship, but there was little time for celebration. The predictive targeting system that had defeated the Zealoty needed to be installed across the human fleet, and Captain Chun found herself overseeing the massive retrofit program. The Shanghai orbital shipyards buzzed with activity. Dozens of vessels floated in various stages of upgrade, their hulls open to space as engineers installed the new systems. Chun stood in the observation lounge of the station, watching a team work on the Steadfast, sister ship to the Tortoise. The integration is proceeding ahead of schedule, reported Commander Lisa Park, Chin's former tactical officer who now headed the upgrade program. Though we've hit some interesting challenges. Oh, the predictive algorithms work beautifully against known opponents. We have centuries of combat data for the Zealothi, decades for the Krellians, and reasonable amounts for most other species. But what happens when we encounter something truly unknown? It was a question that had been bothering Chun as well. Humanity's victory had been built on patient observation and analysis. But the galaxy was vast, and not every threat would give them time to study. Their discussion was interrupted by an urgent communication from Admiral Thompson. The older woman's face was grim as she appeared on the screen. "Sarah, we have a situation. Deep space monitors have detected an unknown force moving through the Helix Nebula. They're heading directly for Altarian space, and they're not responding to any communications. Zealothi remnants? Negative. These ships match nothing in our database. They're using a form of propulsion we've never seen before, and their energy signatures are—" Thompson paused, choosing her words carefully. "Alien. Truly alien. Not like any species we've encountered." Chun felt a chill run down her spine. First contact scenarios were dangerous enough when you had some common ground. But a completely unknown force, ignoring all attempts at communication? "The Alliance Council is convening an emergency session," Thompson continued. "They want the Tortoise to lead the investigation. You're the only ship that's proven capable of handling unknown tactical situations. How long do we have? At their current pace, they'll reach the outer Altarian colonies in 2 weeks. Sarah, there's something else. Long-range scans suggest this force number's in the thousands. If they're hostile, understood, Admiral, the Tortoise can be ready to depart in 6 hours. Make it 4. And, Sarah, be careful. We're flying blind on this one." The Tortoise departed Earth orbit accompanied by a mixed fleet, Zealothi fast attack ships, Krellian heavy cruisers, and vessels from a dozen other Alliance members. It was the first true joint operation, and Chun could feel the tension among the crews. Old enemies working together was one thing in theory, quite another when heading into potential combat. "Jump coordinates locked in," announced Navigator Williams. "Ready to enter hyperspace on your command, Captain. All ships, this is Captain Chun. Remember, we go in peaceful, but prepared. Rules of engagement are defensive only until we know what we're dealing with. If things go bad, trust your allies. The ship next to you might have been an enemy 6 months ago, but today they're your lifeline." She took a deep breath. "Execute jump." The stars elongated and vanished as the fleet entered hyperspace. Chin used the transit time to review what little they knew. The unknown ships were roughly spherical, each one the size of a small moon. They moved in perfect synchronization, maintaining a formation that looked more like a crystal lattice than a military fleet. No visible weapons, no obvious engines, just smooth surfaces that seemed to absorb sensor scans. "Captain, you need to see this," Lieutenant Commander Rodriguez called out, pulling up historical records on a screen. "I've been going through ancient archaeological databases. There are references to something called the Void Dancers and ruins on 17 different worlds." Chun moved to look over his shoulder. The texts were fragmented, written in languages that predated most current civilizations. But certain themes emerged: spherical ships that moved in impossible ways, beings that existed partially outside normal space, devastation that followed in their wake. "These records are over 1 million years old," Rodriguez said quietly. "If these are the same beings, then they were traveling the stars when most of our species were still single-celled organisms," Chun finished. "Send this to all ships. Everyone needs to know what we might be facing." The fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Helix Nebula. The cosmic cloud glowed with ethereal beauty, gases painted in blues and purples by distant stars. But Chen's attention was immediately drawn to the sensor readings. "Mother of God," whispered someone on the bridge. The unknown fleet hung in space before them, exactly as the long-range scans had shown. Thousands of perfect spheres, each 1 kilometer in diameter, arranged in a complex, three-dimensional pattern. But what the scans hadn't shown was how they moved. The spheres didn't accelerate or decelerate like normal ships. They simply existed in one location, then existed in another, with no transition between. It was as if space itself bent around them, allowing them to sidestep the normal laws of physics. "They're quantum shifting," the science officer reported, awe in her voice. "They're not moving through space, they're moving space around them. The energy requirements must be astronomical." "All stop," Chen ordered. "Signal all ships to hold position. Communications, try everything. Radio, laser, quantum entanglement, even old-fashioned light signals. We need to make contact." For long minutes, they tried every form of communication known to Alliance science. The sphere ships continued their steady progression toward Altarian space, showing no sign of acknowledging the attempts. "Captain," called out sensor operator Zhao, "I'm detecting something strange. The spheres aren't just moving through space, they're leaving some kind of residue behind. Microscopic tears in space-time that are slowly healing themselves." Chun studied the data, a terrible realization dawning. They're not using space correctly. They're damaging it with their movement. At this rate, they'll leave a trail of spatial instabilities all the way to the Altarian homeworld, Zhao confirmed. Even if they're not intentionally hostile, their very presence is destructive. A new voice crackled over the communications system. Admiral Krixtar, commanding the Zealoty contingent. "Captain Chun, my scouts report they can match the sphere's apparent velocity, but only in short bursts. We could attempt to get ahead of them, establish a blockade." "Negative, Admiral. We don't know how they'll react to being blocked. For all we know, that could be seen as an act of war." "Then what do you propose?" "We cannot simply let them tear their way through inhabited space." Chen was about to respond when the spheres suddenly stopped. All of them, simultaneously, as if controlled by a single mind. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, space in front of the tortoise began to ripple. "All ships, shields up," Chen barked. Defensive positions. A smaller sphere, no larger than a shuttle, materialized directly in front of them. Unlike the massive ships, this one was translucent, and Chun could see something moving inside, a shape that hurt to look at, as if it existed in more dimensions than the human eye could process. "Captain, it's sending a signal," communications reported. "But it's not like anything I've ever seen. The data is structured in 11 dimensions. Our systems can barely parse it. Do your best. Put through the main speakers." What came through wasn't words or even sounds in any conventional sense. It was pure meaning, somehow transmitted directly into their understanding. Each crew member heard it in their own language, felt it in concepts their minds could grasp. "Wanderers, seeking, lost path, time fractured. Help, please, help." Chun stood slowly, her mind reeling from the contact. "This is Captain Sarah Chun of the Earth ship Tortoise, representing the Galactic Cooperative Alliance. We hear you. How can we help?" The response came as a flood of images and sensations. The Void Dancers, for that's what they called themselves, were beings from another phase of reality. They had been exploring the universe for eons, sliding between dimensions like dolphins through water. But something had gone wrong. A catastrophe in their home dimension had left them stranded in normal space, unable to return. Their method of movement, which had once been as natural as breathing, now tore at the fabric of space-time. They were dying, their multi-dimensional bodies slowly collapsing into three-dimensional space. Every jump they made hastened their demise, but staying still meant certain death. "They're looking for a way home," Chin said softly. "They're lost and dying, and their very existence in our space is killing them." The bridge was silent as the crew absorbed this information. These weren't invaders or conquerors. They were refugees, fleeing a disaster beyond human comprehension. "Can we help them?" asked Dr. Patterson. He had come to the bridge when the alien communication began, his medical instincts triggered by the mention of dying beings. "I don't know," Chen admitted. "Their technology, their very existence, is beyond anything we understand. But we have to try." She opened a channel to the Alliance fleet. "All science vessels, all specialists, I need you working on this problem. The Altarians' expertise in theoretical physics, the Krellian understanding of dimensional barriers, human adaptability, pool everything. These beings need our help." War Master Grontak's voice rumbled over the comm. "Captain, while I appreciate the humanitarian impulse, we must consider the risk. What if helping them makes things worse? What if it tears open a permanent rift between dimensions?" "Then we deal with that when it happens," Chen replied firmly. "But right now we have thousands of sentient beings dying in front of us. The Alliance was founded on the principle of cooperation over conflict. This is our first real test of that principle." The next several hours were a frenzy of activity. Scientists from every member species worked together, sharing theories and running simulations. The Tortoise-S computers, designed for predictive combat algorithms, were repurposed to model multidimensional physics. The Void Dancers waited patiently, their sphere ships hanging motionless to avoid further damage to space. Occasionally, the small sphere would transmit more information. Equations written in cosmic constants, star maps of their journeys, fragments of their history. Chun found herself coordinating efforts between species that had radically different approaches to science. The Altarians thought in pure mathematics, the Krellians in engineering practicalities, the Zelethi in dynamic flow states. Humans, as always, try to find connections between all approaches. "I think we have something," announced Chief Science Officer Chun, no relation to the captain. "The Void Dancer's home dimension isn't actually that far away in cosmic terms. It's more like it's at a different angle to our reality. What they need isn't power to break through. They need to rotate their existence back to the correct orientation." "How do we do that?" "We use their own ships. Those spheres aren't just vessels. They're focusing elements for multidimensional energy. If we can get them arranged in the right pattern and synchronize their quantum signatures, we can create a dimensional lens," finished an Altarian scientist. "Yes, the mathematics support this, but the precision required would be extraordinary." Captain Shin smiled slightly. "Precision is something we can do. Rodriguez, can you adapt our predictive targeting system to calculate multidimensional movements?" The tactical officer's fingers flew over his console. "Give me 20 minutes and a lot of coffee." While the technical teams worked, Chen established better communication with the Void Dancers. The small sphere had moved inside the Tortoise-S shuttle bay, its occupant, if that was even the right word, interfacing directly with their computers. The being identified itself as Symphony of Cosmic Waves, though it acknowledged this was a crude translation of a concept that existed partially outside linear time. Through painstaking exchanges, a picture emerged of the Void Dancer's civilization. They were explorers and artists, creating grand patterns across multiple dimensions. Their ships weren't just vehicles, but instruments in a cosmic orchestra, each movement part of a greater composition. The catastrophe that stranded them had been caused by an experiment in their home dimension, an attempt to harmonize with the fundamental frequency of reality itself. "We reached too far," Symphony transmitted, the meaning tinged with sorrow. "Sought to touch the source of all songs. Instead, we shattered the bridge between worlds." "We all make mistakes," Chen said gently. "What matters is fixing them. My people have a saying, fall down 7 times, get up 8. You're not done yet." The solution, when it came, was a fusion of technologies and philosophies from across the Alliance. The Void Dancers would arrange their ships in a specific pattern calculated by the Altarians. Krellian gravity generators would create localized distortions to enhance the effect. Zelethi vessels would use their speed to trace specific paths through space, creating resonance patterns. And the Tortoise would coordinate everything, its predictive systems ensuring perfect synchronization. This is either going to work brilliantly or tear a hole in reality, muttered someone on the bridge. Have faith, Chen said. The alliance was built on taking impossible chances. The operation began at what humans called dawn, though in deep space the term had no meaning. Thousands of sphere ships moved into position, guided by alliance vessels. The tortoise sat at the center of the formation, its computers running calculations that pushed them to their limits. All ships report ready, announced the communications officer. Chen took a deep breath. Symphony, are your people prepared? Ready, grateful, hopeful. If fail, remember US. Asterisk, we'll remember you either way. But this is going to work. She opened a channel to all ships. All vessels, initiate dimensional rotation protocol on my mark. 3, 2, 1 mark. Space itself seemed to hold its breath. Then, reality rippled. The sphere ships began to glow, their surfaces shifting through colors that had no names. The Alliance vessels traced their prescribed paths, leaving trails of gravitational distortion. At the center of it all, the tortoise coordinated the incredible dance, its systems predicting and adjusting for variations measured in Planck lengths. For a moment, Chun could see it, the angle at which the Void Dancer's dimension intersected with their own. It was beautiful and terrible, a vista of possibility that the human mind wasn't meant to comprehend. Through that crack in reality, she glimpsed cities of living music, stars that sang in harmony, beings of pure thought dancing between galaxies. Then, with a sound like the universe sighing, the sphere ships began to fade. Not disappearing, but rotating out of three-dimensional space. One by one, they slipped back to their home dimension, each departure accompanied by a pulse of gratitude that every Alliance member felt in their bones. Symphony of Cosmic Waves was the last to go. The small sphere hovered in front of the tortoise view screen, its occupant projecting one final message. Debt. Friendship. When ready, find US. New songs TO, share. Asterisk then, it too was gone, rotating back to its proper dimension. Space healed itself with barely a scar, the only evidence of the Void Dancer's passage being the memory of those who had witnessed it. The bridge of the tortoise erupted in cheers. Throughout the Alliance fleet, crews of different species celebrated together. They had faced the unknown and chosen compassion over fear. They had taken beings beyond their understanding and found a way to help them. Well done, everyone, Chun said, allowing herself a moment of pride. Signal all ships. Mission accomplished. Let's go home. As the fleet prepared to jump back to Alliance space, Chun received a private communication from Admiral Krixtar. The Zealoty officer's expression was unreadable. Captain, I must admit something. When we first detected the Void Dancers, my instinct was to attack. Unknown forces approaching our space have always been enemies to eliminate. But you chose differently. We all did, Admiral. That's what the Alliance is about. No, Captain. You led. We followed. The tortoise once again proved that strength isn't about speed or firepower. It's about having the wisdom to know when not to fight. After Krixtar signed off, Chun stood alone on the observation deck, looking out at the stars. The tortoise had been built as a warship, designed to be patient and unstoppable in battle. But perhaps its greatest victory had been achieved without firing a single shot. In the years to come, historians would mark this as the moment the Galactic Cooperative Alliance truly became more than just a treaty. Faced with the unknown, they had chosen unity over division, compassion over conquest. The slow human ship that everyone had mocked had once again shown the way forward, not through superior technology or tactics, but through the simple recognition that sometimes the greatest strength is knowing when to extend a helping hand instead of a weapon. The peace lasted exactly 3 years, 4 months, and 16 days. Captain Sarah Chun was attending a diplomatic reception on the Alliance capital station when the first reports came in. She watched the celebration around her, Zealoty dancers performing aerial acrobatics, Krellian drums thundering in complex rhythms, human musicians adding their own melodies to the mix, and felt a chill as her communicator buzzed with an emergency signal. Admiral Thompson's face appeared on her personal screen, tight with worry. Sarah, We need you back on the Tortoise immediately. We've lost contact with 7 frontier colonies in the past hour. Lost contact. Communication failure. We thought so at first. Then the refugee ships started arriving. Sarah, something is consuming entire worlds. Not conquering, consuming. The survivors described ships that eat through planets like acid through metal. Chen was already moving, her formal dress uniform forgotten as she headed for the docking bay. What kind of ships? That's just it. They're not ships in any sense we understand. Witnesses describe them as living metal, shape-shifting masses that adapt to any defense. The colony's automated defenses, shield systems, even the predictive targeting arrays. Nothing worked. The Tortoise was docked at the station's military sector, its crew on shore leave. Chun sent out an emergency recall, watching her people stream back to the ship. They came running from restaurants, theaters, recreational facilities. The 3 years of peace hadn't dulled their training. Within an hour, the Tortoise was ready for departure. But this time, Chun wasn't leading a fleet. Ships were scattered across Alliance space, engaged in exploration, trade, and patrol duties. It would take days to assemble a proper force. We can't wait, Chun told her assembled senior staff. Every hour we delay could mean another world lost. We go in alone, assess the situation, and buy time for reinforcements to arrive. Commander Park frowned. Captain, with respect, the Tortoise was designed to fight predictable enemies. If these things adapt to any defense, then we'll have to be unpredictable, Chen replied. The Tortoise beat the Zealothy by understanding patterns. Maybe this time, we need to create patterns these things can't understand. The jump to the frontier took 18 hours, the longest 18 hours of Chen's career. She used the time to study every scrap of data from the refugee ships. The descriptions were horrifying in their consistency. The attackers appeared as clouds of metallic particles that coalesced into whatever form was most effective. When faced with energy weapons, they became reflective. Against projectiles, they dispersed into dust too fine to hit. They flowed over shields like water, consumed whole metal like rust on fast forward, and seemed to learn from every encounter. They're not just adaptive, Chief Science Officer Chen reported. They're evolutionary. Each encounter makes them more efficient at defeating that type of defense. It's like fighting a virus that develops immunity in real time. What about their goals? Why consume planets? Resources, possibly. The consumed worlds are stripped down to their cores. Every trace of metal, rare elements, even organic compounds. But there's something else. The consumption follows a pattern. She brought up a star map showing the affected systems. They're not taking the richest worlds or the most strategic positions. They're following ley lines. Ley lines. Captain Shun leaned forward. You mean the old navigation channels? Before faster-than-light travel, ancient civilizations had mapped currents in space. Paths where the fabric of reality was slightly thinner, making travel easier. Modern ships ignored them, but they still existed. Exactly. Whatever these things are, they're following paths laid down millions of years ago. They're not random attackers. They're following a plan older than most of our civilizations. The Tortoise dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the frontier zone. What they found exceeded their worst fears. Where the colony world of New Bangalore should have been, only debris remained. Not the chunks of a destroyed planet, but dust, fine particles spreading through space like a cancer. Dear God, whispered Navigator Williams. 6 billion people live there. Sensors sweep. Chen ordered, forcing her voice to remain steady. Find me these things. They didn't have to search long. The cloud of living metal was already moving toward its next target, the agricultural world of Harvest Prime. At their current rate, they would reach it in 6 hours. 20 million lives hung in the balance. Battle stations, Chun commanded. All hands, this is the captain. We face an enemy unlike any we've encountered. It learns, adapts, and evolves. So we're going to teach it the wrong lessons. Her plan was audacious in its simplicity. Instead of using their best tactics first, they would deliberately use outdated, ineffective strategies. Let the enemy adapt to fighting an incompetent opponent, then suddenly, switched to advanced tactics when it mattered most. You want us to fight badly on purpose? Rodriguez asked, incredulous. I want us to fight predictably badly, Chen corrected. Make the same mistakes repeatedly. Use the same failed tactics. Convince this thing that we're not a threat worth optimizing against. Then, when it's overconfident, we hit it with everything we've really got. The tortoise moved to intercept the metallic cloud, deliberately broadcasting its position on all frequencies. The enemy responded immediately, a portion of the cloud breaking off and surging toward them. Here we go, Chen muttered. Helm, evasive pattern Alpha 1. Alpha 1 was the most basic evasive pattern in the fleet manual, a simple zigzag that any first-year cadet could predict. The metallic cloud flowed forward, easily matching their movements. Forward weapons, fire pattern basic 3. The Tortoise-S forward batteries opened fire with a simple spread pattern that any decent enemy could avoid. The cloud did more than avoid it. It analyzed the pattern and positioned itself perfectly to minimize any potential damage. For 20 minutes, the Tortoise fought like a training ship on its worst day. Every tactic was textbook, literally from the basic combat textbook. Every maneuver was telegraphed, every weapon discharge predictable. The metallic cloud grew more confident, pressing closer, allocating less of its mass to defense. It's working, reported the science officer. The cloud is adapting to our apparent incompetence. It's not even trying to optimize anymore. It's just flowing through our attacks like they're not there. Good. How close are we to Harvest Prime? 2 hours out. But, Captain, at this rate, the cloud will be on us in 30 minutes. Chen nodded grimly. Then it's time for Phase 2. Rodriguez, prepare the Chaos Protocol. The Chaos Protocol wasn't in any manual. Rodriguez had developed it during shore leave as a theoretical exercise. What if they needed to fight an enemy that learned too quickly? The answer was to be so random that learning became impossible. Protocol ready, Captain. But remember, we can only use it once. After that, even chaos becomes a pattern. Understood. All stations, on my mark, switch from training mode to Chaos Protocol. Make every shot count, because we won't get a second chance. The metallic cloud surged closer, now treating the tortoise with almost contemptuous ease. It had adapted to their basic patterns, learned their simple strategies. It knew exactly how this slow, predictable human ship would fight. It was completely unprepared for what happened next. Mark! The tortoise exploded into action. Weapons that had been firing in simple patterns suddenly discharged in configurations generated by quantum random number generators. No pattern, no predictability, just pure chaos. The ship itself began maneuvering using a navigation system that literally rolled dice to determine direction changes. The metallic cloud recoiled, its adaptive algorithms struggling to find patterns that didn't exist. Parts of it were vaporized by weapon strikes it couldn't predict. It tried to reform, to adapt, but how do you adapt to pure randomness? It's working, Park shouted. The cloud is destabilizing. But Chen could see the problem. Already, the enemy was beginning to counter-adapt, spreading itself thinner to minimize damage from random strikes. It couldn't predict where attacks would come from, but it could ensure that no single attack would be devastating. Phase 3, Chen ordered. Now we get creative. The tortoise had one more surprise. During the 3 years of peace, its crew hadn't been idle. They had studied every combat report, every anomaly, every impossible victory in human history. And they had prepared for the day when conventional tactics wouldn't be enough. Deploy the paradox mines, Chen commanded. From the tortoise-S hull, small devices launched, each one containing a localized space-time distortion. They didn't explode in any conventional sense. Instead, they created pockets where cause and effect became scrambled. Inside their fields, effects preceded causes. Matter existed in multiple states simultaneously. The metallic cloud, for all its adaptability, was still bound by the basic laws of physics. When it encountered the paradox fields, its very nature worked against it. Its adaptation algorithms went into feedback loops, trying to adapt to conditions that changed based on the act of observation itself. Parts of the cloud began to consume themselves, the adaptation process turning inward. Other sections froze, locked in states of quantum uncertainty. The perfectly evolving enemy had encountered the one thing it couldn't adapt to, paradox itself. But the victory came at a cost. The paradox mines were destroying local space-time, creating rifts that would take years to heal. And the main mass of the cloud, still approaching harvest prime, had learned from its advanced portion's fate. "Captain, the main cloud is avoiding the paradox fields," reported the sensor officer. "It's willing to sacrifice parts of itself to map safe paths." Shin made a hard decision. "Then we give it nowhere safe to go. Helm, set course for the heart of the cloud. Maximum speed." "Captain." The helmsman turned, shock on her face. "You heard me. We're going to ram them." The bridge fell silent. The tortoise was tough, but flying into a cloud that consumed metal was suicide. "Trust me," Chin said quietly, "and prepare for emergency separation." The tortoise accelerated toward the metallic cloud, its hull beginning to glow from friction with scattered particles. The cloud, sensing an easy meal, opened like a mouth to receive them. "All hands, emergency separation in 10 seconds, Chin announced. "Remember your training. Remember your courage. Remember that 20 million lives depend on us." At the last possible moment, the tortoise did something no one had thought possible for such a large ship. It separated into sections. During the refit, human engineers had installed a radical modification. The ship could split into 5 independent sections, each with its own engines and weapons. It was meant as a last resort survival mechanism. Now, it became an offensive weapon. The 5 sections of the tortoise spread out inside the cloud, each one deploying every remaining paradox mine simultaneously. The cloud, having committed to consuming what it thought was a single large ship, found itself filled with multiple sources of space-time distortion. The effect was catastrophic. The metallic cloud's attempt to adapt to 5 different paradox fields at once caused a cascade failure. Its evolutionary algorithms collapsed, its matter conversion processes reversed. In trying to consume everything, it consumed itself. The sections of the tortoise burst free from the collapsing cloud, scarred but intact. Behind them, the enemy that had consumed worlds was reduced to inert dust, its adaptive capabilities turned into its ultimate weakness. "All sections report in," Chun ordered, breathing heavily. One by one, the 5 parts of her ship confirmed survival. "Damaged, running on emergency power but alive." "Signal Harvest Prime," Chun said. "Tell them the threat is neutralized. And give me a damage report. We need to put our ship back together." As the tortoise sections carefully maneuvered to reconnect, a new signal appeared on their sensors. Ships were arriving, the Alliance fleet, led by Admiral Krickstar's fastest vessels. "Captain Chun," the Zealothy Admiral's voice crackled over comms. "We detected the battle from 3 systems away. That was impossible. No ship should survive being inside one of those clouds. The tortoise is full of surprises, Admiral. We learned that from fighting you." There was a pause, then something that might have been laughter. "Indeed. Though I notice your slow ship managed to arrive here before our fastest vessels." "Sometimes being first isn't about speed," Chin replied. "It's about being willing to go when no one else will." The reconstruction of the tortoise took 6 hours. Alliance engineers worked alongside the human crew, fascinated by the separation system. What had started as a survival mechanism had proven to be a combat innovation that would reshape naval design. But Chin's thoughts were elsewhere. The metallic clouds hadn't been random attackers. They had followed ancient paths, consumed worlds with purpose. Someone or something had sent them. "Captain," Science Officer Chun approached with a data pad. "I've been analyzing the debris from the cloud. The base material isn't naturally occurring. It was manufactured, programmed, given purpose. By who? That's the troubling part. The isotopic signatures match theoretical predictions for matter that's over 10 billion years old. Whoever made these things did so before our galaxy was fully formed." Chun stared at the data, a chill running through her. They had defeated the weapon, but not the hand that wielded it. Somewhere in the dark between galaxies, something ancient was stirring. The metallic clouds had been scouts, testing defenses, gathering data. Double the patrols along the ley lines, she ordered, and start analyzing every piece of ancient archaeological data we can find. If something that old is becoming active again, we need to know why. As the Alliance fleet escorted the battered but victorious Tortoise back to base, Chun couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. They had mocked her slow ship, then feared it, then respected it. Now, it had done the impossible once again. But in the vast darkness of space, older things than the Alliance were taking notice. The Tortoise had proven that the young races could defend themselves, could think beyond their limitations. Whether that would be enough against what was coming, only time would tell. For now, though, they had won. The slow human ship had once again become the nightmare of those who threatened peace. And Captain Sarachun would make sure it remained ready for whatever came next. The ancient station drifted at the edge of known space, a relic from a time before any current civilization. It was here, in the shadow of mysteries older than memory, that Captain Sarachun received the transmission that would change everything. 5 years had passed since the defeat of the metallic clouds. The Alliance had grown stronger, with new species joining and technology advancing at unprecedented rates. The Tortoise, now flagship of the combined fleet, had been refitted with the best innovations from across the galaxy. But Chen knew they were still children playing with toys compared to what lurked in the dark. "Captain, we're receiving a signal," Communications Officer Patel announced, confusion in her voice. "It's coming from everywhere. Every direction, every frequency, all at once." The bridge view screen lit up with symbols that hurt to look at, geometry that folded in on itself, mathematics written in concepts rather than numbers. But somehow, impossibly, everyone understood the message. The shepherd's return. The flock has grown wild. Order must be restored. Asterisk Chen felt her blood run cold. They had suspected the metallic clouds were weapons of something ancient. Now, that something was announcing itself. "All stations to full alert," she ordered. "Signal the Alliance Council. And get me every expert on pre-galactic civilizations we have." Within hours, the Tortoise was hosting an emergency conference. Representatives from every Alliance species crowded into the war room, along with archaeologists, historians, and theoretical physicists. The message continued to repeat, growing stronger with each iteration. "The shepherds," mused Dr. Kelvin, an Altarian expert on ancient civilizations. "There are references in the oldest ruins. Beings who claim to guide the development of younger species, to maintain order in the galaxy. They vanished billions of years ago. And now they're back," growled War Master Grontak. "This message, it's not a greeting. It's a decree. They see us as their flock, grown wild in their absence." Admiral Krickstar's scales shifted to a pattern of deep concern. The metallic clouds, they were tests, seeing how far we developed without supervision. And we passed those tests by destroying their probes. Which means they see us as a threat to their order, Chun concluded. The question is, what do they intend to do about it? They got their answer 3 days later. Ships began appearing at the edges of Alliance space. If ships was even the right word. They were massive constructs of impossible geometry, surfaces that seemed to exist in more dimensions than the eye could process. Each one dwarfed even the largest Alliance dreadnoughts, and they moved with a deliberate, inexorable purpose. "Counting over 1,000 contacts," reported the sensor officer, his voice strained. "They're not using any propulsion we can detect, but they're moving at, they're moving at light speed. Actual light speed, not FTL. That's impossible," someone muttered. "The energy requirements alone. They're not bound by our physics," Chin said quietly. "They wrote the rules before our species existed. Now they're coming to enforce them." The lead shepherd ship broadcast another message, this time including images. They showed the galaxy as it had been billions of years ago. Young species carefully guided, conflict prevented before they could start, development proceeding along predetermined paths. It was a vision of perfect order, but also perfect stagnation. Then, the images shifted to the present. The alliance, the cooperation between former enemies, the rapid technological advancement, the defeat of the metallic clouds. To the shepherds, it was chaos. It was wrong. It was disorder that needed correction. You have exceeded parameters. You have violated boundaries. You will return to proper paths or be removed. Asterisk removed. Chen repeated the word. They're talking about genocide, wiping out entire civilizations because we don't fit their plan. The Alliance fleet mobilized with unprecedented speed. Every ship, every weapon, every defensive platform was brought online. Species that had fought for millennia now stood side by side, facing a threat that predated their very existence. But how do you fight beings that existed before the laws of physics were fully formed? We need to think differently, Chun told her assembled commanders. The tortoise beat the Zealothi by being patient. We helped the Void Dancers by being compassionate. We defeated the clouds by being unpredictable. What quality do we need now? Defiance, said a new voice. Commander Lisa Park stepped forward, her eyes bright with determination. They expect us to submit because they're older, more powerful. But age doesn't equal wisdom, and power doesn't equal right. We need to show them that the galaxy has grown beyond their shepherding. Shin nodded slowly. You're right, but defiance alone won't stop them. We need to prove that their order is obsolete, that what they see as chaos is actually evolution. The first engagement came at the frontier world of Haven. A single shepherd construct approached the planet, broadcasting demands for submission. The local defense fleet, following Chen's distributed command protocol, didn't attack. Instead, they did something unexpected. They invited the shepherds to observe. For 24 hours, the construct watched as different species worked together on Haven. Humans and Zealothi cooperated in factories. Krellians and Altarians collaborated on research. Former enemies shared meals, raised families together, built something greater than the sum of their parts. The shepherd construct paused, its impossible geometries shifting slightly. Then, it broadcast a new message. Irregular patterns detected. Re-evaluation required. Asterisk, it was a small victory, but a victory nonetheless. The shepherds could be made to doubt. Chen seized on this. All Alliance worlds implement protocol harmony. Show them what we've built. Don't fight unless attacked, but demonstrate that our chaos has created something beautiful. Across the galaxy, worlds began broadcasting their achievements. Art created by multiple species working together. Scientific breakthroughs that came from combining different perspectives. Cities where former enemies lived in peace. Children who didn't even understand why their parent species had once fought. Some shepherd constructs paused, studying these displays. Others, however, were not swayed. They began their correction. Beams of energy that didn't destroy but transformed, reverting technology to primitive states, altering minds to remove inappropriate knowledge. They're trying to turn back our development, reported Chief Science Officer Chun. Make us into what they think we should be. Then, we need to show them they're wrong, Captain Chen declared. All ships implement the Evolution Protocol. The Evolution Protocol was humanity's last gift to the Alliance, born from their unique perspective. Where other species had developed along single paths, speed, strength, intellect, humans had always been generalists. Jack of all trades, master of none, but oftentimes better than master of one. The tortoise led by example. It began demonstrating not what it was, but what it could become. The separation system activated, but this time each section adapted differently. One became a speed-focused interceptor using Zealothi principles. Another transformed into a heavy fortress implementing Krellian design. A third became a sensor platform utilizing Altarian technology. The 5 sections worked in perfect harmony, covering each other's weaknesses, amplifying each other's strengths. It was a living demonstration of the Alliance's core principle: diversity creating strength. Other Alliance ships followed suit, mixing and matching technologies, strategies, and philosophies. The battlefield became a kaleidoscope of adaptation and evolution, order emerging from apparent chaos. The Shepherds' response was confusion. Their constructs, designed to enforce single paths of development, couldn't process the hybrid nature of what they were seeing. Some began to malfunction, their correction beams faltering as they encountered beings that didn't fit any category. But the eldest of the Shepherds, a construct that seemed to fold space around itself, was not deterred. It broadcast with the weight of eons. This chaos cannot be permitted. If you will not accept correction, you will accept erasure. The construct began to glow, drawing power from somewhere outside normal space. The energy readings were beyond anything the Alliance had seen, enough to sterilize entire star systems. All ships, converge on my position, Chen ordered. If we're going to make our stand, we make it together. The Alliance fleet gathered around the tortoise, ships from dozens of species forming a complex three-dimensional pattern. At Chen's command, they began to move in unison, not the rigid formation of military precision, but the fluid harmony of a dance. Each ship's movement influenced the others, creating gravitational resonances, electromagnetic fields, even quantum entanglements. It was chaos theory made manifest, small actions creating large effects, randomness generating pattern, diversity creating unity. The Shepherd construct fired. The beam of annihilation met the dancing fleet and scattered. The harmonic patterns created by the ship's movements formed a kind of shield, not a technology, but of synchronized diversity. The energy that should have destroyed them was refracted, reflected, transformed into harmless light. For the first time in billions of years, a Shepherd construct retreated. Impossible. Pattern does not conform. Order violated, yet stability maintained. Asterisk. That's what you never understood. Chen broadcast to all the Shepherds. Order isn't about control. It's about harmony. You try to make the galaxy a garden with every plant in rigid rows. But nature creates order through diversity, stability through adaptation. She gestured to her crew, to the Alliance fleet surrounding them. We are your success, not your failure. We've grown beyond needing shepherds because we've learned to shepherd each other. Our chaos isn't disorder. It's evolution. And evolution doesn't stop. The Shepherd constructs hung in space, processing this. They had existed since the galaxy's youth, certain in their purpose. Now, faced with proof that their rigid order was inferior to adaptive chaos, they experienced something they never had before. Doubt. One by one, the constructs began to communicate with each other in ways beyond mortal understanding. Geometries shifted, dimensions folded, concepts that had been fixed for eons suddenly became fluid. Finally, the eldest construct spoke again, but its tone had changed. Hypothesis. Shepherds obsolete. New paradigm emerged. Evaluation. Flock has become shepherds. Conclusion. Withdrawal recommended. Asterisk wait, Chen called out. You don't have to leave.